The image the world has of a Spanish star usually involves the elegance of Xavi or the surgical precision of Iniesta. But on the dirt fields and in Barcelona's youth academy, a boy with untamed hair broke that mold. Marc Cucurella was never the chosen one. While the spotlight at La Masia was searching for the next Messi, Marc was just the boy who ran too much, who bothered people, and who carried a curious burden: the weight of an exuberant celebration. Imagine arriving at the biggest club in the world at 14 years old and being greeted with the icy silence of your new teammates. He wasn't just the newcomer. He was the enemy who, a month earlier, had taken off his shirt and celebrated a victory over Barca itself in the faces of those who now shared the locker room. This initial isolation forced Marc to develop a shell. He didn't have the refined technique that the Catalan DNA demanded, nor the physique of a modern gladiator. He was an outsider, a player that performance analysis machines would summarily ignore. Before becoming a starter for Spain in the 2026 World Cup, Cucurella was just a disposable fullback who debuted for the first team in 2017 and was never called up again. He was sent to the modest Eibar, far from the glitz of Camp Nou, where football is played with gritted teeth. There, the world saw him as a supporting player, a worker destined for oblivion in the midfield of La Liga. What nobody knew was that, beneath that curly mane that his mother insisted he not cut, beat the heart of someone who had learned that if you're not the best technically, you need to be the smartest, the most resilient, and above all, the most unforgettable. He wasn't there to be loved. He was there to survive the system that rejected him. The breaking point in Cucurella's career didn't happen with a major title, but inside a statistical analysis room. José Luis Mendilibar, the coach who changed his life at Eibar, uttered words that would shatter the confidence of any ordinary athlete. If it were up to the data, I would never have signed him. Consider the power of that statement in modern football, where every heartbeat is monitored. In speed tests, Marc was slow. In strength tests, he was frail. In high-tech machines, he was a ghost. A system error. This is the central incident in his saga. The moment when football becomes a war between algorithm and instinct. While Chelsea invested millions in signing him years later, the hatred on social media exploded. He became the prime target of the frustration of a fan base that didn't see him as the super athlete. He was rough. He was annoying. He was visually strange, with that hair that seemed to float out of sync with his movements. At the Club World Cup, the scrutiny was merciless. Every mistake was amplified by his unique appearance. But it is precisely in the heat of the conflict that Cucurella's identity merges with his game. He realized that his hair wasn't just about aesthetics. It was his battle flag. He decided that if the world hated him for not being the norm, he would double down. He transformed his annoyance into game reading and his lack of speed into intellectual anticipation. He stopped trying to prove he was an elite athlete and started proving he was a master of decision-making. The incident wasn't an injury or a mistake. It was a direct confrontation with global rejection, where Marc understood that his greatest weapon wasn't in his feet, but in his ability to be hated for exactly who he is. Herein lies the secret that critics and Mendilibar's machines fail to grasp. There's a silent statistic in football: the occupation of space through visual perception. There's something mystical about the fact that, in a sport of uniformity, Cucurella is instantly recognizable from any camera angle, by any teammate, in any fraction of a second. What began as a wish of his mother and a way to stand out from the crowd as a child became an unconscious, tactical advantage. The twist is that Marc Cucurella doesn't just play football. He plays with the psychology of space. By being annoying and omnipresent, he destabilizes the opponent. The curious thing that few notice is that his consolidation in the Spanish national team for 2026 didn't come through perfect crosses, but from a metric of preventive positioning that borders on perfection. He's always 2 seconds ahead because he knows he doesn't have the legs to arrive 2 seconds later. The rare statistic here is his efficiency in defensive duels without heavy physical contact. He wins through the intelligence of his interceptions. He subverted the logic of the modern fullback, who attacks like a winger. He rescued the essence of the defender who thinks of the game as a tableau, a chess master. That same boy who was ignored by his Barcelona teammates for celebrating too much is now the player everyone looks for when the game gets tough. The final twist is poetic. The player that nobody would hire based on science has become the indispensable pillar of Spain. A favorite for the World Cup title, because he understands something that computers don't. Football is a game of human error, and he is the expert at inducing others to make mistakes. Marc Cucurella's impact on world football transcends the pitch and raises a necessary debate. Are we creating robots or players? His legacy is a manifesto against the dictatorship of data. If we had only followed the rankings of strength and speed, we would have missed one of the greatest game readers of our time. Cucurella represents the resistance of organic football. For many, he is still an aesthetic blemish, a player who doesn't fit into the plastic elegance of elite sport. For others, he is a supreme example of resilience. He teaches that identity, symbolized by his iconic hairstyle, is non-negotiable. Upon arriving at the 2026 World Cup as a regular starter for Chelsea and Spain, he proves that personality is a physical attribute as important as jumping ability or stamina. He changed the way scouts look at flaws. Now, when a young player doesn't stand out against the system, coaches wonder, does he have the brains of a Cucurella? He humanized the left-back position, transforming a position of sacrifice into a stage for personal affirmation. He's not the obvious captain, but he's the moral leader of those who were underestimated. His legacy is living proof that football still belongs to the intelligent, the stubborn, and those who, even when ignored in the locker room at 14, have the courage to keep taking off their shirts to celebrate who they truly are. He's not just a player. He's proof that the system may fail in its evaluation, but visceral talent always finds a way to shine. Marc Cucurella's journey forces us to look at our own hair, at those characteristics of ourselves that the world tries to cut or standardize. How many times have you been the Cucurella of your company, your school, or your family? The one who didn't fit the productivity standards, who was considered boring simply for being dedicated, or who was underestimated because he didn't possess the tools everyone considered essential. Marc's story isn't about football. It's about the right to be authentic in a world that demands copies. Seeing that 28-year-old man running under the World Cup sun, with his curls blowing in the wind, is seeing the victory of the individual over the algorithm. He inspires us to embrace what makes us different, even if it attracts the hatred of the misunderstood. He shows us that the greatest victory isn't the gold trophy, but the moment you look to the side and realize that those who couldn't face you in the past, today, need your past to win. Football is wonderful because it allows an outsider to become a national hero. And now, I want to know from you, what was a moment in your life when you were underestimated for not fitting the mold, but you turned things around using only your intelligence and your essence? Is there a Cucurella in your memory, a player that everyone criticized, but that you always knew was special? Share your story in the comments. Let's celebrate the authentic, the resilient, and all those who, against all odds, decided to be unique.